Hello and welcome to this recent webinar in our International Education and Schools Fair. And we're delighted to be here today speaking to James Wellings, Head of School of Mougins British International School. So I'd like to invite James to join me.
Hi Fiona, thanks so much for having me.
Great, it's lovely to see you. So you're in a wonderful part of the world, in France. Tell us a bit about where the school's located and how you got to be there.
That's right. So we're Mougins British International School, and we're based down in the south of France on the French Riviera. For those of you who know this area, the nearest sort of town that you may have heard of would be Antibes. And we're not too far away from Nice. So Nice International Airport, for those of you who would like to visit us, is about half an hour away, just down the road. And the south of France here comes with all the things you would expect the south of France to be. Lots of sunshine, lovely countryside, and we've got a beautiful school down here, and we feel very lucky to be here.
So what draws families to the school, and what's the sort of mix of French, British and other nationalities?
Sure, that's a great question. So we're a truly international school. We've got 55 nationalities, and some of those are within families of mixed nationalities. So mother's French and father's Dutch, or any number of mixes. About 25% of our students are British, about 25% are French, and the rest are made up of pretty much, if you can name a country, we've likely got somebody here from that country. And there's a real mix of backgrounds, cultures, professionalism. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs who live down here on the Riviera who are self-employed and have chosen to come and live here because of the geography, and it's such a nice place to be. But we've also got many people who work for big companies. This area is actually called Sophia Antipolis, which is the technological park. It's called the Silicon Valley of France.
All right.
That's how they try and sell it. So a lot of the technology industry is based down here. So we have lots of families whose parents work for those companies. And then we have bankers and accountants and people who work in the yachting industry. So you name it, really. We have a real range of international families.
Yeah. And have you found the mix possibly has changed since the pandemic? Were people drawn to the area? Because we're certainly on the relocation side. Companies moving people have, for example, said, right, well, you can choose the location or the country you're going to be, but we would like you to cover the whole of Europe or whatever. Are you noticing that sort of?
Yeah, that's been a really interesting shift, I think, and that's probably happened in twofold. So I think more French families have moved away from big cities after the pandemic. There was a real drive to have sort of areas with open space, and down here is a lovely place for that. Internationally, outside of the UK, I think that's true. I think we've had more Scandinavian families move down here, and I think open air and the weather and so on. The British movement has perhaps been checked a little by Brexit, because some of the challenges around Brexit and visas and so on, which we could talk a little bit more about if we wanted to. Whereas, although it is possible, it's very possible to come and live down here as an expat, it's slightly more difficult than it used to be. So I wonder if those two things counter each other, perhaps.
Yeah, quite. And so you're also part of a schools group. So does that make it a sort of pathway for families that are quite mobile to get around other countries, but also you have a lot of schools in France as well?
For sure, yeah. We've got a group. The group is called Globe Educate, and we're about 70 schools now worldwide, primarily based in Europe, although there's a couple of schools in India and in Malaysia. And we do mainly British system, French system, and the international baccalaureate system. So students who come to one of our schools, like here in Mougins British International School, can easily move to other schools within the network. We talk to each other a lot. And just within our British school, we call it a cluster. There's a British school cluster of 10 schools. So we work very closely together as 10 schools. I work with the other head teachers. We've done exchanges. So, for example, we did an exchange last year to Stonor School in Bath in the UK, which is a school in equestrian centre. And we had students go there for 3 weeks, and we had some of their students come to us for 3 weeks. So that gives us and our students and families a range of opportunities that may not exist if we didn't have that. So it's a real benefit.
Brilliant. And that's very useful for our sort of audience of the parents and the global mobility professionals and the relocation consultants supporting their moves.
It's reassuring, isn't it, that if you know that you can move in and work in different places, but your children can have a consistent educational approach. Yeah, for sure.
Brilliant. Yes. So what about your obviously British and English speaking school, but how important is French and the French language and the culture in the school, and is that one of the pulls that draws pupils to you?
This is understandably a question that we get asked a lot, and I think it's a really, really important question. And I think the fact that we've got 25% of our students are French actually goes some way to answering that question just within itself. But we are definitely a British school. We follow roughly the British national curriculum, although we don't have to. But we use that as our basis to create an international curriculum off that. And French is given a large part of that curriculum, far more, for example, than it would be in Kent, where you're talking to me from. And that's understandable because we recognise that we're a British school in France. So in terms of the French language, it's widely spoken on campus, although definitely English would be our first language on campus. You'll hear French widely spoken. Many, if not most of our staff are very competent in French, if not bilingual. And by the time the students leave us, if they're with us for a considerable amount of time, they have fluency almost always. So yeah, we very much recognise our host country, if you like, is France. We're very proud to be here. I think we're all Francophiles. So we place an importance on that for sure.
Yeah. And what other languages do you also cover, and how do you support native languages for children and possibly the parents?
Yes, you can imagine we have a huge range of languages, and actually if you go around campus, you'll hear plenty of languages spoken. So in terms of the curriculum, we have a lot of students who come to us who maybe English is their second or third language. So we actually have a big English as an additional language program to help students make sure that they are up to the speed necessary to succeed within the British system. Obviously, we have French, and we also have Spanish as part of our curriculum. And then outside of that, there are opportunities within school for Russian. And we have in the past offered Arabic and Mandarin, although we don't currently do that. But where there's a demand, we can always put new languages on. And then there are various clubs and societies around the area and families in Italian or Russian, for example. Oh, we do some Russian classes. Yeah, we have Russian classes too. So you'll see a range of primarily European languages, but a range of languages in the school and around the community.
So can you tell me a bit more about the curriculum at the different ages and stages, and is it very atypical of a British school, or have you adapted?
Yes, sure. So that's a good question in itself. The atypical British school, what does that look like? So I suppose we're not a what would be described in England as a public school, you know, your Etons or your Harrows and your Bota Hats and this kind of approach. So in that sense, I don't think that we're very British. I think we're much more international than that. But in terms of the curriculum processes, if you come from the UK or you're familiar with British education, you'd be very familiar with what you see here. So to run you briefly through the stages, we start off with our 3-year-olds, and we follow the EYFS curriculum, the Early Years Foundation Stage curriculum from the UK, which focuses on developing language, fine motor skills, and basic numeracy and literacy through play. So it's a wonder, and I invite anybody, if you're in the area, you're always welcome to come and see us, and we'll take you over to our early years area, and you'll see how they set it up for the kids to really target their individual sort of progress in a sort of real world play-based scenario. So they're not sitting down, they're not in desks, it's all set up in that way. And this is widely recognised as best practice for early years children. As we move up the school, you're probably more likely to see how you would imagine a classroom to look, although we augment that in many ways. So our primary school do all the things that you would expect: numeracy, literacy, history, geography, a lot of French. We also have IT provision, computer science. We do Lego robotics. So we're a Lego school, which is great. My daughter's actually currently building a robot that she makes go around the science lab at the moment, which she gets very excited about. And we also do something called School in the Woods. So we try and get the students outside. And if you could see out my window just there, we back onto a beautiful woodland. And we've got our own gate that goes out to the back. So the students are out there quite a lot. And then we have PE and the subjects that you would expect. I think it's probably also important for you to mention positive education, which is actually something that comes out of Australia. And this is the beauty of being an international school, is you can base yourselves on the British model, but if there's something that you see really working somewhere, you can sort of beg, steal and borrow a little bit. So positive education is all based on positive psychology, and it's around our mental well-being and physical health. And we put a big emphasis on that for all of our students. We have dedicated lessons, but also considerable amounts of processes that help our students to feel safe and happy within the environment. Because once they're safe and happy, they're much more likely to learn and make friends and enjoy. And we really pride ourselves on that. I think that's a real feature of the school. And very quickly, year 7, 8 and 9. So that would be the start of our secondary school. Again, you've got the range of subjects that you might expect. And then we move into the GCSE program, which is probably the most widely recognized world qualification for 16-year-olds. And following that, we move into the A-level program, which again is a highly recognized, if not the most recognized program for 18-year-olds. And
the GCSEs are IGCSEs, or is it a mix?
Yes, so that's a good one. It's a little bit confusing in as much as IGCSEs and GCSEs are both worth exactly the same. But some of the programs for the international GCSEs suit international students better. So, for example, history might be less British-centric, if that makes sense. So we actually have a combination. We have some of our subjects are GCSEs, some of our subjects are IGCSEs, depending on which program fits our cohort the best. But the outcome is the same. The qualification that they get has exactly the same value and currency with other schools and universities.
Brilliant, thank you. And it's useful to hear about your attitude towards well-being and this positive education, which sounds fascinating. But certainly, I think parents, children, and everyone welcomes that outdoor experience, as well as the positive well-being features that schools adopt nowadays.
Yeah, we've actually brought on board, part of our senior leadership team now is a role as a head of wellbeing and safeguarding, a lady called Mrs. Sarah Michael, and her job is to help track, monitor, support staff in helping students to feel safe and happy in school. And she's supported by a wonderful team of 5. And we do all sorts of, maybe there's not time here, but we do all sorts of interesting things and processes to actually investigate and look at how happy kids are, and then put interventions in place if needed to help students really feel comfortable here.
So new pupils are going to slot in and have the individual attention.
Sure, without doubt. I mean, that's something that we put a lot of time and effort and energy into, new families, new students, and that's from the moment that they first come, welcoming at the gate, knowing what to expect, knowing their way around school, making sure they've got at least 2 students to talk to on that first morning, and been shown around. We actually sometimes give families the opportunity for a taster day. So if they want to, the kids can come in and experience the school for a day. And a nice statistic for you, we have never had a taster day that hasn't resulted in the student coming to our school. So I really like that one. It's a really good one.
Excellent. Yes. So that's going to be a very welcoming and easy process for new families. So transition care and all those good things people are familiar with will be found.
Yeah, and that transition care, I think it's also important to say that sometimes those transitions are difficult for students, and you can put transition care in place, and it can still be difficult for students because they've left their friends at home. It's a new environment. It's a new language outside of school. So I suppose all the proactive steps we put in place to help welcome students, but just as important as that is the monitoring, watching, and stepping in, or slight light touches, or working with the families if we see that a student's struggling a little bit, which of course can happen. These are young people in a new environment, but we take real pride in that, in being able to support the students, whether it goes really smoothly from day one, which it often does, or sometimes it's a little bit bumpier, which it sometimes is. we've got the provision in place to help sort of everybody along that spectrum.
And of course, globally mobile families may unfortunately have to leave earlier than the full school term, so the years they were expected to be there. So again, these goodbyes and doing that well is something that schools you're also used to.
Hard that. And I've worked in 5 international schools around the world, and my daughter's actually come to this school and have been in other international schools, and that's something that you do have to get used to, the transition and people leaving. Now, interestingly for us, we don't have a huge student turnover each year. So families that come here do tend to come and stay here on average for 6 to 7 years, which is quite high for an international school. So those sort of longer lasting friendships do tend to occur here. And I think our retention rate year to year is about 90%, just below 90%.
Excellent. So let's have a bit of a chat about STEAM and STEM. And if you're in the Silicon Valley of France, that must be really quite an inspiration, and I suppose spurred you on, and you've got access to some of the best and brightest things that are going on in the technology and engineering world. So can you tell us a bit more? I think you call it a STEAM approach to learning, don't you?
So STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, maths and art. And the art's the one that always sort of confuses people a little bit. But the idea being that there is an artistic element to design, which is attached to those other disciplines. So if this is a ever increasing, I mean, it always has been important, but there's an ever increasing emphasis on the STEM or STEAM subjects within education. And we want to push that just as much. So that will look as normal as your science or your maths lessons, as you might expect. But then we've got clubs and opportunities and something called our Thrive program, which maybe I'll explain a little bit in a moment, where kids have the opportunity to do lots of robotics. And that's from the very youngest kids. So I think I spoke about my daughter earlier on doing the Lego robots. And actually the Lego can be quite complex. It can go quite high. But we just got donated from one of the local companies here a state-of-the-art robotic arm. Which can be programmed to do high precision level work. I guess now I'm not an expert in this, so I'll be careful what I say. But in the way that you might imagine robot arms putting together very fine pieces of jewelry or machinery, these kinds of things. So our A-level students in physics or within the clubs are able to really get involved in programming high-level robotics kind of stuff, which is fantastic. So really there's opportunities for that all the way through. We have coding and computers available to all of our primary students, and our students from year 6, so that's our 10-year-olds, all the way through to our 18-year-olds, all have a laptop each at the school.
And is there anything more you want to highlight about the Thrive program? Because it sounds interesting, exciting. Yeah. I was at one of the big ed tech shows in the UK just after Christmas, and I was just blown away, as you say, by the demonstration of robotics and all the other AI things that are available, and young people learning environmental aspects, building model houses with solar panels and little wind turbines. It's quite incredible and really must enthuse everybody.
Yeah, well, I think it does, but I also think it causes some fear for some people too. I've just released a podcast actually, which may be something we can put on the link to this, which is with our head of AI in the group, a lady called Clara Hawking, talking about the impact that artificial intelligence is likely to have on education, but also on young people and the wider world, which is a very interesting, inspiring, and also worrying conversation. And I think it's okay to say all these things at the same time, because I think as a school we have a duty to be, as far as we can, ahead of the curve, to be trying to work with these technologies that are coming down the line very, very fast, get our heads around those and help prepare our students to use them effectively. And for me, this is more than just sort of ChatGPT to write your essay for you. I think that's a very sort of low level discussion. I think There's much richer and bigger discussions that we can have about that. So we've got a head of AI within the group. I think that says something. And we're really sort of investigating and exploring, like many schools around the world, how do we effectively utilize this change in technology, which is a big shift. I think you asked me about the Thrive program, but it's okay. We've got onto that sort of interesting subtopic. But is there anything else you'd like to know about AI?
Well, I would say about careers of the future. I mean, this well-versed phrase about preparing pupils for the future, but you don't know what the jobs and careers are of the future. And there you are sitting in this hub of innovation in the location you are in France. I mean, how is much of a challenge is that for you as a head? And how do you go about predicting the future and planning ahead?
So I don't think you go about predicting the future. I don't think that's the game that we're in. I think that tends to come out a bit unstuck if you try and predict the future. And that phrasing around we're preparing kids for jobs that we didn't know exist yet has been around for a long time. It's been true for a long time. So, for example, podcasting is now a huge industry, which only 7 or 8 years ago, really no kids would have thought about that. Or the head of AI for the Globe Educate. This is a job that just simply wouldn't have existed maybe 2 years ago. So instead of predicting the future, what we want is to give our kids a range of knowledge and skills within traditional educational subjects, which still have a great deal of value, because you need to have knowledge and skills and cultural competence to be able to act within the world, but also a set of qualities and competencies that allow you to engage with new issues or new learning. So making sure that kids can work well together with each other, that they can communicate effectively across many different forums, that they can utilize technology effectively, that they can be resilient, that they can take care in the first instance of their own well-being. These are really, really important things that will allow kids to be adaptable. I think it's probably the key word. We want students to leave here to be able to adapt to new situations rather than try and prepare them for predicted things which are almost impossible to predict. So I think that would be my summary of that.
Well, that's a good point to perhaps bring in this rather impressive slide you've got about where your young people are heading off to university, and the sorts of places maybe you want to just talk around some of those which might trigger.
Very happy to, for sure. So we are very proud of our students and where they go to university. The majority of our students still choose to go to the UK, which perhaps isn't surprising given that we're a British school. But we have students going to all of the different countries that you can see on there, and have noticed a pattern whereby European schools in France, Holland, and Italy and Spain in particular are becoming more and more popular. This is a good choice for European kids who want to still study high quality courses in English, because many of the universities there are offering now extremely high quality courses in English, and often at a much more reasonable price point than UK or US universities. We have students now. I could list, if you can think of a famous university, Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, Harvard, Purdue, etc. We've got kids going to all of those places. We've had excellent take up at some of the top universities in the world. In the UK, we often call those the red brick universities, and of course in the US, you've got your Ivy League universities. So no doubt our kids can be and have been and will be prepared to get into some of the best universities in the world. But I personally, and I think we here as a staff at Mougins School, are just as proud of the children who are able to go to the university that's right for them, the university that's going to help them on their pathway. And we've actually just got, this year, we've got some students going to a local university in Nice to do computer gaming, for example, computer game design, a very well-known and established course within the local area. That's the perfect course for them. We've also got 2 students who will be going to the Sorbonne in Paris, which is one of the most prestigious universities and one of the most academic universities in the world. So we make sure that we have a program to support each and every student on their individual pathway. Our goal is not to get everybody into Oxford, but if somebody wants to go to Oxford, we want to get them there. If they want to go to a university in Spain, we will help them to get there. And we've got something called the Life Matters programme, which supports our sixth form, so our year 12 and our year 13 A-level students throughout that process, from the moment they start A-levels to when they leave us in June.
And I think when we were chatting before, you've had someone go to one of the prestigious arts universities or academies, isn't that right?
That's right. Now I'm going to butcher the pronunciation name, so I'm not going to say it. But it's Gourban, I think it's called. Right. One of the top arts universities in France. Which I suppose is also maybe worth saying there that, you know, we're a British international school, but that gives all of our students pathways to go literally anywhere in the world. So if they want to go back to the UK or to the UK for university, the pathway is there. US pathway, Canada pathway. If they want to stay in France, if they love France, if they want to go to university in France, the pathway is there for them too. So we're an international British school that allows international students to go internationally to university.
And then, of course, sport. A lot of British schools are very keen on sports, and young people certainly want to thrive in that area. And no doubt you participate in all sorts of leagues all around the world and in different countries.
We have some really exciting programs. So I'll go back to Thrive, which we mentioned earlier on. So our Thrive program is an enrichment program for all of our students four times a week, and that allows them to elect a course of their choice. And it's mixed, so it might be with children who are a little bit older or a little bit younger than them, so they get to mix with different children. And there's everything from sports, we've got American football, rugby, netball, tennis, badminton, table tennis, all sorts, mountain biking. And then there's arts, there's drama, there's chess, there's textiles, you name it. So it's a lovely program where students can try and get involved and pursue a passion. And of course, as you say, a passion for many of our students is sport. Now, interestingly, for those of you who are not familiar with France, the whole French setup around sport is very, very different for those of you who might be familiar with the UK. So in the UK, sport is very much driven by schools. In France, in the French national system, the French national schools don't do much sport. It's all driven by the towns or the villages. So you play for your local village or you play for your local town, and they're incredibly well subsidized to go and play football for the year or to be in part of the ski club or whatever it might be. And the opportunities for students within the French system are amazing. And all of our kids can benefit from that. And they also get the benefit of them being able to speak French in those associations. But of course, being a British school, we want to do it the British way too. So in addition to those things that are available outside school, we have the sports teams that you would expect. So we have football, basketball, volleyball, our primary sports teams, and we play in a local league with other international schools in all of those, and we take part in international tournaments. So each year one of our big ones is called the Mediterranean Cup, where we go to Verona in Italy, and we take 5 teams to Verona in Italy, and we play teams from all over Europe and North Africa for 3 days. It's amazing, and they all stay in the hotel together, and there's this big tournament, and at the end of the 3 days, well, we came out on top last year. We didn't quite do so well this year, but last year we won the under 11s girls tournament, I think.
And I'm sure you have lots of volunteers.
There's a fair few, but it's a popular one that is, yeah. And we have other excursions as well. So in May, our year 5 and 6 students, so that's 9 and 10-year-olds, they are going off to Barcelona for an urban adventure where they'll be doing climbing, parkour, skateboarding, and also some cultural activities around Gaudi and the museums and all the things that you might expect in Barcelona. Our 9s and 10s are going surfing in Biarritz. They've got a 5-day surf camp in Biarritz. And our 7s and 8s are going to Bristol to do some history and some surf on the artificial wave. I don't know if you know, in Bristol, they've got an artificial wave there, which will prepare them for the surf trip in year 9.
Brilliant. So it sounds a wonderful experience. So a rounded education and lots of opportunity. So to sum up, what would you like our parents, relocation professionals and the corporate clients sending people, moving people around the world to sort of take away a flavour of the school?
Sure. So I can say with confidence that if you came to visit us, you'd walk into our school and you'd find a very warm and welcoming school. And you would see a lot of happy children. And we know that we've got lots of happy children because, as I said earlier, we've got measures and sort of tests for that, as well as just the feel that you get in the school. So first and foremost, I think the children and the families that come here are happy. They like coming to school. They make good friends, and that creates an environment where learning can be really effective and can really happen. And then so at the end of that, what comes out sort of the other end is we get students who make huge amounts of individual progress. So whether their starting point is sort of here or here, it doesn't matter. We're looking to progress for those individual students and to cater for those individual students. And our outcomes are fantastic. Our outcomes are well above international and national averages in the UK, well above. And for what's called a non-selective school, so we don't have an entrance examination, for example, we would be competing with selective schools in terms of our academic results in the UK.
Mm. So the future of education, are positive?
Oh, I'm very positive, because education is one of the most important things that we have in this world, isn't it? And I think that's a huge responsibility for all of us who are in education. And I think this perhaps links back to what we were talking about with technology and AI. And I do think that is going to change the landscape of education. And I think we have to be very aware of that and very quick to work out what the dangers and what the positives are. We don't want to be sitting here in 10 years thinking, oh, I wish. So I think it's incumbent upon us to be on that. But I also believe strongly that there is still going to be a place and space for human interaction, schools like ours where kids can play and hang out and be in the sunshine and be outside and sit in classrooms and discuss with teachers and have those sort of real world experiences. And I think, my most glass half full view of it all would be that some of the technologies that we have coming down the line will augment and help education to sort of push on and be a massive benefit for our students and for young people as they come through. That's my hope, and we'll try and make sure that happens here.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, James Wellings, Head of School at Mougins British International School. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, Fiona. Real pleasure. Thank you.
So as you've heard, we've been talking to James Wellings, Head of School, and you can read his bio details here. And I'm Fiona Murchie, Managing Editor of Relocate Global, Think Global People, the multimedia that supports families, relocation professionals, and global mobility and international project teams. So if you are wanting to get in touch with Mougins, please if you want to get in touch with the school, here are the admissions details, and they'll be pleased to hear from you. This webinar has been produced by Relocate Global and Think Global People, a multimedia with a range of resources for independent thinkers, and includes plenty on education. And throughout the year, we have our international guides, the online school show, and various newsletters and magazines. So please keep in touch and keep informed about what's going on in the world of education, international management, and global mobility.